Hello and welcome to episode number lucky 7 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast. My name is Jason Fanelli, the Esports and Gaming Insider for Fox PHL The Gambler here in Philadelphia and iHeartRadio. We are having some fun today. We got 2 big-time interviews lined up for your enjoyment, one in the world of esports and one in more general gaming. Then I'll wrap up with little more discussion about what I wrote in my blog earlier this week with Nintendo, a couple other things that are on my mind. It's going to be a good show. I'm very excited for tonight's show, and I hope that you are as well. So let's not waste any more time. Here are the 6 in 60 seconds. The Philadelphia Fusion take 2 wins over the weekend, won 3-2 against the LA Gladiators, and a 3-0 sweep against the Toronto Defiant, with 2 more games coming this weekend. The Call of Duty League final home series of the regular season was won by the home team Toronto Ultra. The bracket is now set and playoffs begin August 19th. Meanwhile, 76ers Gaming Club lose in the turn to the Wizards, who finished runner-up to Toronto. They have 2 more games next week to try and make the playoffs. Elsewhere, the Marvel Avengers beta by Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics begins August 7th, with Hawkeye revealed as the first post-launch edition. Cuphead, the indie darling cartoon-based game, shadow dropped on the PlayStation 4 on Wednesday with no prior announcement. And finally, Ghost of Tsushima from Sucker Punch Studios sold 2.4 million copies in 3 days, making it the most successful new IP launch in Sony's history. That is your 6 in 60 seconds. Okay, yes, let's move on now to the Overwatch League. And we are in week 3 of the Countdown Cup, getting ready to finish the season and head to the playoffs. And one of the most interesting teams, I would say, of the 2020 season is the Vancouver Titans under the Luminosity Gaming umbrella. From the runner-up of the Grand Finals last year to really a tumultuous season thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. And joining me now to talk a little bit about that and the team in general is their team manager, Alfred de Vera. Alfred, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Good, thank you. I appreciate your time and coming on with me. So first, for those who don't know, or who may not be familiar with the esports scene yet, run me through a little bit of your day-to-day. I understand you're spread out pretty thin across the entire world.
Yeah, I think it's easier to explain this from what my role was heading into the season and then as the season began to what it is now. So, my job was and is to make the logistics of our team as seamless as possible. So back in December, I traveled to South Korea to set up a boot camp for our players, everything from renting them equipment, PCs, finding them adequate housing, food options in South Korea so they could just focus on the training. I did that towards the end of the month near Christmas, which was a fantastic experience in and of itself. And then come January, we had I can't think of any sports league that would have to deal with immigration to so many different countries. So specifically with the Overwatch League, managing the immigration process to first and foremost work permits in Canada, where we're based, immigration to be able to compete in the United States, where the majority of games would be played. Obviously, we had a trip planned as well to the United Kingdom, to France, and then of course to South Korea and China. So a lot of immigration paperwork was in my and we actually before everything shut down. I wouldn't say shut down, but was kind of on pause. We were free and clear to play anywhere really in the world. And then of course just with our players on both teams, organizing travel, everything from airfare to hotels to shuttle buses when we land. Just making the travel aspect, I think, before the season started, one of the most daunting things that teams faced was just how much travel they were going to face. So, having experience in that in the hockey world, just using that to my advantage and just planning, talking to different travel agencies, hotels, that was my day-to-day. Now it's a little bit different. Obviously, travel is not happening, so it's gearing our players and still keeping them motivated to be able to compete at a high level in a new online environment. A lot of our players currently with the Titans are based in several different countries, from Canada, the United States, France, Denmark, and even Saudi Arabia. So it's working with our coaches to make sure scrims are happening in appropriate time blocks, sensitive to where they're located. Keeping up with daily player needs as they're needed, just to keep their mental and physical health up, despite being pretty far away, and we still want them to be able to feel like a team. So anything we can do to contribute in that regard to both teams under our umbrella, I would suggest would be my day-to-day today.
Now, you mentioned the travel aspect, and you're absolutely right. Other sports leagues, like the traditional sports leagues, just don't have to worry about that because they're all either in the U.S. or Canada, and that's basically it. Are there countries where it's going to be a problem to get all these things taken care of? Are some countries easier than others?
Yeah, I think, I'm fortunate to have had several immigration lawyers assisting me throughout that process. So it wasn't me, specifically filling out arduous amounts of paperwork. But there are different letters that are required on behalf of the team, the league, that certain governments enforce pretty steadfastly. So, it kind of depends on the region, but for the most part, as long as you have your ducks in a row, there's no surprises. You know exactly what you have to provide in order to be able to play in those regions. So as long as you have those ducks in a row and know what the timelines are, some immigration processes can take upwards of months. Others can take a couple days to a week or two if you expedite the process. So kind of knowing where you are, when you're traveling to those areas, that was key learning, and something that, we actually crossed the finish line. We could have played anywhere in the league, knowing that. But I think it's just kind of knowing where your calendar is, when do you have to be in a certain country, and using that as a work back schedule.
Wow. So that to me is probably the most daunting task, and it's not something I even considered when I drew that question up. So power to you for doing all that, even though unfortunately it ended up being really for naught because of the pandemic world that we live in now. I would say objectively that the Vancouver Titans, were the hardest hit by this pandemic. Unfortunately, you had to release your entire team and essentially start fresh mid-season. What went into that decision to let those players go and start with a new team? And what were the alternatives that were trying to be avoided in making that decision?
Yeah, it was a tough one, and it was one that no one could have predicted would have happened the way it did, and it's truly unfortunate. Still have a lot of good relationships with a lot of those players and coaches that we departed with mutually. So, tough to even think about that even to this day. But we wish them well, and I know they're going to be successful in Overwatch League and in esports in general in the future. So for us, I think the simplest way to answer that is, when COVID hit, expectations changed for us, as they did with almost every business. But our players, being as competitive and as driven as they are, they had their own expectations of what the environment they should train and live in should be. So there was some disagreements that happened in that regard, and we both felt if we were going to move forward, it was something that we had to mutually depart from. So again, unfortunate the way it happened, but we wish them well, and it's kind of onwards and hopefully upwards for us from here.
Now, once things go back to normal and you're pursuing the Overwatch League season as it was intended, would the door be open to any of those players to return?
Yeah, you never want to close the door on anyone, especially with the amount of talent that was on this team. We've obviously learned a ton, not just from what's happened over the last 6 months or 7 months with COVID-19, but just where we were in season 2. The team coming to to live in Los Angeles. Most of them had never lived outside of home before. So, how we wanted to make that transition for them to a new country seamless was a learning from season 2 to 3. And if we were to do it from 3 to 4, I'm sure there'd be so many more lessons that we would impart. But I think for us, it's the biggest takeaway for me is just being concise with how things change, what your expectations are from a business standpoint, from a team standpoint, making sure they're aligned with your players and your coaching staff. Because without that alignment, I would say it's hard to kind of come to that meeting of the minds.
Sure. Okay. Yep. Well, I would hope that that maybe somewhere down the line it would be possible, just because it seems so unfortunate, I guess is the word we used, that it happened this way, especially for a team that I was there in Philly last year. I watched those grand finals, and they were there. They held their own. Granted, San Francisco's a bit of a buzzsaw, but they held themselves in a very high standard in the post game, and I really admired that team for coming in and playing the way they did, and especially in a crazy arena like that, one of the biggest arenas Overwatch League has ever been in, I imagine. So I'm hoping, I hope for your guys' sake that maybe somewhere down the line we get the old band back together. But this new team, they did have some rough spots when they first started playing games again, but the Summer Showdown tournament, they really seemed to gel, and they got the 4th seed in the bracket. Have you seen some improvement in these 2 months, fast improvement, since everything went down? And do you think the team can continue to make waves at the end of this season?
Absolutely. I think for our struggles in early May when the team was first put together, that was, I don't want to say to be expected, but definitely not surprising for us, because a lot of these players, while a lot of them came from Second Wind and had played together, it's quite a jump to play in the Contenders League to all of a sudden play at the top league in the world. So there was an adjustment period that needed to take place, and scrims needed to be a little bit more regimented in how they were scheduled, and the competition that you fared against on a daily basis, just to make sure you're keeping your reps up at the highest level. But as time became more on our side, and players had more time to do individual review, scrimmage against some of those top AL teams again, they were able to feel a little bit more comfortable, and I think you're able to see that now. So I think the more time they can gel together as a team, again, they haven't had a ton of time prior to being put together to do that. So we're pleased with the results, and I know they got nothing but improvement from here on in. So it's exciting to see.
Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve, or even like a chemistry curve, you could say, because they had never played. I mean, you said they came from Second Wind, but they never played in this format, in this situation. So it does make sense that there would be some rough spots. I absolutely agree with you there. It was nice to see them in that 4th slot in the Summer Showdown. Especially, that's a Cinderella story waiting to happen. You know what I mean? Speaking of the playoffs, moving on a little further down the line, the decision to include all 20 teams in the Overwatch League and all 12 teams in the Call of Duty League has been slightly controversial, although for the most part understandable with the online nature of the brackets this year. What's your general feeling on how these playoffs were structured this year? And if you could have made adjustments, or if you had a say, was there anything you would have changed?
I mean, it's hard for me to sit here today to say that I change anything. Given where we are in the standings, just to be able to continue to play and to know that we're going to be able to continue to play is positive for us as a team, as a business. So, personally, right now, I wouldn't change anything. I think it's great.
That makes sense. I asked Joey Nubsy that same question last week, and he was like, "Nope, wouldn't change a thing." Because we have a chance now to run the table in eliminations, and for both of your team's sakes, I hope you do. Like I said earlier, there's nothing like a good Cinderella story. So both of you guys can just pound it in there and make some waves. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I think for the Titans too, for us, as the league was starting to move online, we had a few of our matches postponed, rescheduled. We had a lot of a catch up to do just to be able to play the same amount of games as everyone else. So, to be able to do those catch up games towards the end of the year, when again we're more gelling as a team and they've had a little bit more time to build that chemistry, has been great. So for us, we're able to it'll be a little bit more even playing field, and I'm sure a couple other teams that they didn't start off at the same time as everyone. Some like the Londons and the New Yorks. I'm sure a lot of logistics had to go into place. For teams like that, for them to be able to similarly catch up to the same number of games as everyone else. So I think. Finality of such for everyone to aim towards, I think that's positive.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And then last question for you regarding the Titans, because they were runner-ups last year, they did make it to the grand finals. Despite this being a different team than you fielded last year, is there a bit of added pressure to maybe gel and find their footing faster so that they can maybe get back to that? Or is this just a one day at a time situation?
I think what was surprising to me, just talking to some of our players and our coaches, is that coming into being signed to the Titans, that was their expectation. But for us, that's always something we want to say we're going to want to do, is to be able to compete again at that. I was being in Philadelphia. You're 100% right. Just you talking about it just kind of brings back some great memories and some goosebumps. Honestly, it was such a fantastic environment, and I really want our current team to be able to experience that or something similar to that, because that's only going to make you want to be a better player and to compete at a higher level when you know that you're reaching the absolute top of your profession. So our hope is that we get there, and hopefully the Cinderella story that you've been saying throughout this podcast comes true. But for us as well, it's just tempering expectations and just knowing that no matter what happens, we're there to support them.
Sure. And I do have one small final question. Sorry, I know I said final question once already.
Yeah.
You were in Philly last December.
I was. Absolutely.
Did you get a cheesesteak, and where from?
I have gluten intolerance, so. But that didn't stop me from looking. I can't remember where it was, in Old City. I did manage to find one that did a gluten-free roll. I can't remember what it's called now. It was absolutely fantastic.
Let's see. Let's see if I can find that. Old City.
It was a trek to get there because I spent a lot of time in South Philly, and I knew I had to get a cheesesteak before I left.
That's right. At least you knew. And did you climb the Rocky Steps too?
I've been to Philadelphia several times, so I try to avoid the some of the tourist areas.
Oh, good.
But
you know better.
But the one thing that I haven't been able to do since in a while is to have a cheesesteak since I was diagnosed with this. So I definitely was on the lookout for something that was
it
catered. Yes, that's the one.
Campos, there it is.
Yes,
all right, Campos Deli.
Fantastic.
On 2nd Street in Old City.
I can
gluten-free roll.
I can send my address if they're hoping for some sponsorships.
I'll forward that to them. Yeah, absolutely. So, Alfred, it's been great talking to you. Good luck with everything in both seasons, both playoffs wrapping up in the next couple of months, and hopefully the next time we speak, we'll be talking not about pandemic Overwatch League. We'll be talking about the actual Overwatch League. Alfred, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jason.
Yes, there he is. That is Alfred de Vera, team manager of the Vancouver Titans and Seattle Surge, part of the Luminosity Gaming family of esports teams. Very interesting conversation we had with him. Lots to take into account when you're an esports team manager. Some things that people would not even think about. That travel in the beginning, that's a huge one, especially considering how many countries these leagues go through. I can't imagine that nightmare. For paperwork that he has to deal with on a weekly basis. Hopefully, I hate to say, hopefully the pandemic makes his job come back to normal, but I feel like he'd be buried in paperwork more than he already is. So, but I appreciate him talking to us. I appreciate the time. and the insight. It was very, very interesting with Week 3 of the Countdown Cup of Overwatch League coming up this weekend, and then the playoffs coming in September. But let's move on from Overwatch now, because there's only one game to talk about this week, but it's a big one, and it is sure to satiate your thirst. So let's talk about what's on tap. Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout is the one game coming out this week that you should be paying attention to. It is coming to PlayStation 4 and PC on August the 4th. Fall Guys is a 60-player battle royale game that takes its inspiration from things like Takeshi's Castle, better known to the old Spike TV viewers as Most Extreme Elimination Challenge, Wipeout on ABC, or Ninja Warrior. You start with 60 players. You go through an obstacle course of 5 or 6 different rounds, trying to get to the one character who can grab the crown and win the game. From 60 to 1, going through each different round, losing a couple of people at a time until you get to that last one. I have actually played the game via the beta that came out last weekend, and it is an absolute laugh riot. If the full game is anything like the beta, we are in for a treat. Could be one of the biggest games of the year, for sure. And it's free for any members of PlayStation Plus. Free to download on PlayStation 4 on August 4th. Make sure Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout is on your radar, because it's the only thing on tap this week. What else can you pick? All right, yes, we are back on Cheesesteaks and Controllers, and we're going to move on from the Vancouver Titans now to a bit of experimental gaming. If you have been paying attention to the Xbox Summer Game Fest, the 70-plus demos that are available for download, were available for download earlier this week, had some really, really great titles on there. One of them is called The Vale, and it is an audio-only experience. There are things on the screen, but it is just darkness and dots, and all you have are your ears to get you through the game. And right now, I have with me the studio director of Falling Squirrel, David Evans, to talk about his game. David, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time. How are you today?
I'm good, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For the listeners that are new to your game, give me a quick elevator pitch on what to expect if they were to download this demo.
Yeah, sure. The game is an audio-based game. There are some visuals, you said. But basically, it is a chance for you to walk into a noisy medieval world and experience really close-quarter combat where you hear enemies surround you and you swing out your sword and block their attacks. And there's also sections of the game that are adventure exploration based, where you're dropped into a 3D environment which you can navigate around and find secrets and quests, and pretty much has all the things you would expect in an action adventure game set in a medieval world.
Well, there you go. Thank you for that. So walk me through the process of getting included in the Summer Games Festival, being one of those demos. How was that opportunity brought to you, or was this something you heard about and said, I want to be a part of it? How did that play in?
It was brought to us. We were fortunate that at a conference or an expo we were at, Microsoft showed interest in bringing the game to the Xbox One. Thought it was kind of a brave thing for them to do in selecting a game that was audio based. But they've been pushing it themselves. So they came to me and said, we'd like you to be part of this event. And so I've submitted it, and we ended up being part of it through their initiative, really.
That's excellent. Yeah, and as you said, it's an audio-only game, just dots to let you know what time of day it is, based on what demo I played, and darkness. Otherwise, there's a lot of risk there, because there are people who put perhaps too much regard into graphics and how things look. You don't have that. You are strictly audio. So how does your team try to overcome that risk while putting this game together?
Well, I mean, there's obviously some challenges. The marketing is probably one of the bigger ones to get somebody to be interested in your game. So much of that is on visuals. I mean, I'm part of that. I see a really cool screenshot and I think, wow, that looks interesting. Who knows what the gameplay is like, but I'm already in. So we're incredibly reliant on getting people to try out the experience. So whatever the what do you call it, the threshold for getting someone over that hump to try the game. That's our biggest challenge, I think. And I think once people play it, this game started really as something that was meant for the visually impaired community exclusively, and very quickly we realized there was quite a bit of novelty in just having binaural spatialized sound around you. Here, it's all about the intimate details, people's breathing, footsteps, and things around you, and it really is a different experience and a novel experience to sort of enjoy the game from, which I think had more novelty than we first expected. So once people play it, it seems to be something that carries their interest.
Yeah, so like as you were saying, the binaural audio aspect, I remember in the demo there's that part where you're in the marketplace and you have to find the apothecary. And then the apothecary sends you to another merchant to get supplies that you need, but all you have are the merchants calling out their wares. So you hear someone talking about fine silks, and you hear someone talking about creams and tonics, and you hear the blacksmith's hammer going down. And as it gets closer to you, then you know you're where you need to be as far as which merchant it is. It's very, very fascinating. You bring up the visually impaired. How has their input changed your development? Have you brought? I assume you've brought people in to try it who are visually impaired, and then they gave you tips and pointers based on their own experiences. Has that impacted you at all?
Very quickly, I realized, okay, this is something that could be interesting in this community. So we reached out to the CNIB, which is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, to see if there was interest, and there certainly was. And they actually set up our very first play tests of the game. So the first people to try it were people from the low vision and blind community. And their feedback obviously was instrumental, and just the way they thought about games was interesting. And the probably the biggest takeaway from the playtest was that if we were going to make something that was for this community, we had to recognize this community is incredibly diverse. So there are people who were showing up to play a game for the very first time. So I was showing them their first video game, and people who also are competitive gamers and people who are playing fighting games at high levels, even though they're blind. So this was the gulf we sort of had to straddle in setting up our difficulty levels. So that was probably the first thing we had to deal with, is how do we maybe straddle this? And they were instrumental in helping us figure out how we were going to do that. And then the other thing is just all these little things you take for granted. There's a lot of stuff we think is intuitive that you learn very quickly has to do with years of picking up a controller and knowing how the thumbsticks work and knowing what the buttons are called. These were all things that we had to address in the game for people who may be picking up a controller for the very first time or playing a video game for the first time.
Yeah, like the audio tutorial says, or choose a direction with the left stick and swing with the right stick. Audio tutorial kind of caught me off guard a little bit, because, as you said, I'm so used to reading those things. So to hear it narrated to me, in order to keep the immersion of the game, was an interesting choice. Did you know that audio tutorial was going to be a huge part of your game going in?
Yeah, I mean, we figured it's something we would have to do. We'd done some things that were kind of sleight of hand, where you only get tutorials. Later on, we break this a little bit, but by and large, you get tutorials as a flashback in the past. So when you're playing the game in the timeline of the experience of the main character, you tend not to hear anything that takes you out of the experience. So when you go to a blacksmith, you're literally sort of bartering with them. That's the feeling of running through the inventory of the blacksmith. Mm-hmm. He's showing you wares as you move the stick up and down this selection menu. You don't get a sense that you're navigating a menu. So there's that aspect of gameplay that I think is more immersive than most games.
Sure.
And then this tutorial aspect was something we had to deal with where there's a convention of bringing text up when you don't want someone to come onto the experience, and then having everything potentially that's verbalized in the game being in world. So we did set this up. So yeah, you have flashbacks of training with your uncle where another voice comes in to tell you about the controls. So that was a convention we stick with through the game I think to separate what is completely immersive and what is has to be abstracted to some extent in order for you to understand how to play the game.
Sure. So another question would be regarding the screen. Obviously, they're playing as someone who's blind, so you can't show the environments that they're in. What went into the choice of floating dots? You could have put anything there. You could have put nothing there, but you went with this dot motif. Tell me a little bit about that and what went into that.
Yeah, there's actually more thought than it probably looks like into this. There was a couple things. Early on, we were concerned about technical requirements for platforms that you need to have visuals on your screen. I think from a purist standpoint, I kind of wanted the game to be completely black. I think that was my initial thought, is that, and it is the encouraged experience. I do encourage people to play the game with their eyes closed. I think it's probably the best experience. I think it's easier to play if you are not distracted by anything on the screen. So we had wanted to put something in relatively early to make sure that we were always thinking about the possible need of visuals always to handle some technical hurdle where Xbox or Sony or somebody says you have to have visuals running on your game at all times. So that was the first thought. The second one, I realized that people within the blind and low vision community, because they're quite reliant on these instructions, and many of them had not played as many video games as others. They seem to listen really well, and following specific instructions, their pickup for navigation, like the idea of turning on the spot by pushing left and right in the stick, and then pushing forward and backward, like basically tank controls to move around, was something that they just heard and executed on and never got disoriented. And we realized that people who had more experience with first-person games had some assumptions about what was happening when they were moving the stick that weren't actually there. So the idea of having particles in the 3D space was sort of a sleight of hand of letting visually or sighted players know that might have some expectations of what the control should be, to let them know what they are doing, that they're not strafing. As soon as they understand that, or you understand that, you really do not need those visuals anymore. But because they're in the game, we've given them some meaning. We change color based on temperature, time of day, emotions. Sometimes they act like snow particles, so you can maybe picture that the character's feeling snow on their face, even though they shouldn't be able to see the snow. So we've left them in, but that's pretty much their only purpose.
Oh, that's cool. I hadn't even thought about snow environments yet. That's very, very interesting. So from the visual to the audio, back to the audio aspect, I imagine that the auditions to find your voice actors were a little more involved than perhaps another game may be because of how crucial they are to the experience. How long was your audition process, and do you think maybe you nitpicked or fine-tuned your choices a little more than most?
Yeah, my background before games was film and television. I was a writer-director in Toronto, and then became a cinema director in AAA before slowly moving backwards to more independent productions until I got to this, where I'm making an indie game on my own. So my bar for performance has always been really high. I've cared a lot about it, so I'm not too sure how much different it would be on there's other projects that I spent just about as much time. Maybe the biggest challenge for me was I wanted to include the low vision blind community in the casting. So I threw it a pretty big net to make sure I did get some representation. So that was probably the biggest challenge. And yeah, when it comes to the main character, maybe 50 or 60 auditions that we went through, narrowed it down. But it's all union performers in Toronto through a union called ACTRA. So that's where I knew I wanted to start, just for quality and reasons. But I did have to look outside of the Toronto community. I did get there was a woman who has a radio show in Toronto, who is not an actor by trade, but could do it. And she was actually one of the first people to try the game at the CNIB, and she expressed interest. So I auditioned her, and she has a large role in one of the chapters. And then there was a woman from the United States I found online who's been providing voice for games and podcasts for years, and was really good too. So and then there's another 2 actors in England. I did a London audition because I wanted stronger English and
Sure.
Scottish accents for sections of the game.
Yeah, that builds on the medieval aspect of the setting as well. I feel like medieval and English or Scottish accents are basically hand in hand in those
Yeah,
media.
yeah. The 2 worlds we straddle are sort of an Eastern European, Persian, Arabic sort of part of the world, and you're moving toward a more English, French sort of part of the world.
Okay.
So I ended up. I mean, that actually became a major issue with casting, as I really had a high demand for various accents, and I wanted them to be pretty good. So.
Yeah, well, based on what we hear in the demo so far, they're very, very good. I only have one more question for you.
Yep.
Why medieval? Why was that the setting when you were thinking about the audio-only experience that you decided you wanted to go into? I imagine like a futuristic setting, you would have like your lasers and your and things like that. So what made medieval the choice?
It was, I'd like to say it was more calculated, but we kind of realized it was a good choice as we developed, mainly because the experience that works the best for all audio is something close and intimate. And so melee combat, loud, like noisy people in armor moving around, is ended up being something where it would cut through background atmosphere. So if you had somebody walking around in just cloth, you wouldn't get you would either be broken out of the immersion to wonder why cloth is mixed up so loudly, or you would be competing with background. So, and by the way, we do have moments that are very quiet and you have to listen. There's sort of ninja-like enemies in the world, and sort of some supernatural enemies that are quieter. But then we're able to bring we have context for that kind of combat because it's a quieter area. But if we wanted to have big epic battles, it was a lot easier for us to be able to mix up things like plate armor and stuff. So I think that ended up being a good choice. Ranged attacks, both from enemies and you can use a bow. As you're sort of moving towards an enemy, you can listen for their location. So we do have a little bit of ranged combat, but I think it would have been a bigger undertaking if it had been based around ranged combat.
Sure.
In terms of, and there's those obvious sort of like contextual things where like, if it's a futuristic setting, you got to figure most combat would be related to projectile firing and things that were further away. And that's kind of what we're playing against. Is there's a lot of money and resources that go into making these big, beautiful worlds, and they really play out on the large scale, looking hundreds of feet away at mountain ranges or castles. Yeah. And that's really what works in a visual experience. For us, we realized it's what's within 10 feet of you that really kind of shines. And it's an immersive feel that nobody's going to be complaining about the face effects or the hair or these things that tend to break you out of the immersion. It's solely the performance and these subtle little sounds and how we sort of engineer them around you that immerse you. And I think it's a lower bar for hitting a much higher immersion level. And that's really within 10 feet of the character.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm imagining like walking through a field or plains or something like that, and then having someone shoot an arrow from you from far away where you hear it on your right side, and you hear that, and it goes through your headphones. You know what I'm saying? That is the kind of thing I'm envisioning when you're saying that. It sounds really cool. So if there's any moments like that, I'll be very excited for them. But regardless, the Vale, Shadow of the Crown, excellent demo as part of the Summer Games Festival. Will this demo be available again? I know that the actual event is over. Will you be putting that demo back on Xbox anytime soon?
I think we probably will. I mean, I wanted to see how this went, but again, it's a game that I think you have to play to understand. Mm-hmm. So I think we're gonna want and need to do that. It'll probably be similar to this demo, but I would like to maybe introduce a little magic or at least bow combat to the next one. But I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing that.
Sure, and we also be on Steam and itch.io, correct?
Yep. Yeah, they will simultaneously launch, and that's largely for the visually impaired community that has more access and familiarity with those platforms.
PC, sure. And do you have a launch window?
Well, we're saying this year now. COVID did delay us. We still have a round of voiceover for completion.
Okay.
And we have this thing with these stages here. So we're into stage 3 of the COVID response. Yeah, that means that things are opening up in a way we should be able to record shortly. So I'd like to say by the end of the summer, but certainly by the end of this year.
Perfect. Well, there you go. The Vale, Shadow of the Crown, available hopefully by the end of this year. We'll give it another indie developer told me his game will be ready when it's done. So we'll say that the Vale will be ready when it's done on Steam, itch.io, and Xbox One. Is it coming to any other platforms?
Not so far.
Not yet. Okay, so
Not yet.
A couple other platforms still to go there. But David, thank you so much for your time. This was a great insight into what was a great demo. When the next one comes out, I will be sure to let the people know, and hopefully your game takes off as it deserves to. David, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yes, there he is, ladies and gentlemen. David Evans of Falling Squirrel and his excellent demo, The Vale, Shadow of the Crown. Coming out, as he said, when it's ready, but they're shooting for end of summer, early fall, at least by the end of the year at the most. That demo really did impress me. Not having any visuals whatsoever, only seeing dots and darkness, as I mentioned before. Just having to hear your way through the game is very, very cool. And the accessibility is one of the best parts of it. We talked at length about that. I'm very, very excited for that project, and I'm hoping that it comes out to a lot of fanfare when they do decide to release it. I know I'll be playing it just to experience that world for the first time without any visual cues whatsoever. So good luck to them at Falling Squirrel. Good luck to David Evans. I hope that game is gangbusters when it hits the digital store shelves. So now we are done with that. Let's move on to the speedrun. It's speedrun time. Let's do it. All right, first up on the speedrun tonight, just going to elaborate a little bit on the blog that I wrote at foxphlgambler.com on Nintendo's inaction bringing an avoidable reaction. And what that means is, as of today, July 31st, when you are listening to this podcast, Nintendo has not announced any of the games that they are releasing this holiday season between August 1st and December 31st. None of them. None of them at all. And that is absurd to me. I don't understand how they expect to sell systems when there's no games being sold for them. Right now, there are 7 heavy hitters that I listed on the blog that are coming out. 3 of them were games that are either coming to other systems or already came to other systems and are now coming to the Switch. One of those being from the PlayStation 2 era. And those are the only 3 that have actual solid release dates. 4 more are listed as 2020, but don't actually have any release date. We have no idea when these games are coming. We have no idea what they're going to be like. They're just kind of there. Those games are Apex Legends, Doom Eternal, Bravely Default 2 for the RPG crowd, and No More Heroes 3, which is a stylish action game by a developer named Suda51, one of the best in the business. Those 4 games are all 2020, so before the end of the year. No guarantee that that's actually going to happen. They're just 2020. And the 3 that actually have solid dates are Jump Force Deluxe Edition, Jump Force being a fighting game starring anime characters, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, One Piece, etc. That's August 28th. NBA 2K1 is September 4th. And Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster, that's Shin Megami Tensei, for those who think they speak too fast. October 29th is a remake of a game that came out on PlayStation 2. That's it. None of their first-party titles are there. No Mario, no Donkey Kong, no Zelda, no Star Fox, not that that was ever coming, no F-Zero, which definitely wasn't coming. Pikmin was rumored. There's nothing there. Metroid Prime 4 has been known since 2018. Where's that game? There's so... And the most infuriating part of it is we probably know the reason for this. The reason being COVID-19. If that's the truth, then just tell us. Just tell us that this pandemic is the reason for your delays. That's all I need. They did have a couple of statements. First, back in February, they said nothing was going to be wrong. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to make our stuff. And then on May 15th, during their fourth quarter 2019 financials, the current president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa, that's it, said the following: there are signs of gradual improvement, and so we anticipate that the impact of COVID-19 on production will subside to some degree by summer, and that the volume we'll be able to produce throughout the year will align with our forecast units for this fiscal year. Fine. A month later, June 30th, a month from yesterday, if you're listening to this on launch day, the director and senior managing executive officer, Shinya Takahashi, said Nintendo has faced development delays due to COVID, but it will not affect upcoming releases. In the future, if the pandemic continues, there could be delays in future development and releases. Well, I ask you, sir, of course those development delays won't affect upcoming releases. What games are you releasing? This is a company that pioneered the pre-recorded announcement video in the form of Nintendo Direct. The first one all the way back in 2012, really catching steam in 2013. Why now are they the company that's the most quiet? It makes no sense to me. I don't understand what's happening there. And if something is really wrong, just tell us. Let us know. We are a forgiving and understanding fan base, besides the vocal minority that their social media director is going to have to deal with. If COVID is causing problems internally, even if it's just a slower development cycle because everybody's working from home, fine. But just let your people know that. Their 9-minute partner direct that you let out last week was okay. That's where the Shin Megami Tensei announcement came from. Sure, but that was less than 10 minutes, and it was all third-party partners. We need to know what's going on with you internally. Once the Nintendo fan base has that, they'll be fine. They just need some sort of news. Can you give them that, Nintendo? Can you please give them that? Especially if it's the 35th anniversary of Mario HD All-Stars that I've been hearing so much about. I would absolutely love that. But we need to know. So just come on out with it. We're ready. Tell us everything that you have in store for us. We want to play our Switch. You want us to play your Switch. There's only so much Animal Crossing we can take before we need something new. Just give us something new. Please. Go read the blog at foxphogambler.com. All the information is there. Feel free to hit me at Big Man Fanelli on Twitter if you have any questions, or if you want to come back at me, tell me I'm wrong or a stupid head, or ask me any questions about it. If you're a stupid head, I'm going to assume you're my. If you call me a stupid head, I'm going to assume you're my daughter, because she's the only one that does that at the moment. But enough about games that aren't coming out. Let's talk about games that have already come out, and that is. IGN recently had a little Twitter post listing a few of the PlayStation 4 exclusives that came out between 2013 and now. With the PlayStation 5 on the horizon, they are asking what is the best PlayStation 4 exclusive of the bunch. They list Spider-Man, they list God of War, they list Final Fantasy VII Remake. They have a whole nice list of 9 games plus a 10th slot for something that they may have forgotten. And I, right now, have decided that I'm going to give you my personal top 3 PS4 exclusives. Now, these obviously are games that can only be found on PlayStation 4, some of them on PC as well. I also have to limit it to games that I actually played. So if you want to call me an idiot for not listing Bloodborne or Persona 5 Royal, unfortunately, those games I have not gotten into yet, as well as some of the more not indie, but the smaller releases like Concrete Genie or Shadow of the Colossus remake. I haven't played those yet either. And there are some games I have to finish, like Spider-Man, Judgment from Sega, and Days Gone was also a Sony game. But I do have 3. I do have 3 games that I consider to be the top top 3 PlayStation 4 games of the console. Again, this may change as I finally catch up and play some games I haven't played yet, but here is where I stand. The third place is Final Fantasy VII Remake. The reason it's third place is because some may consider it better than my top 2 games, and I would agree with you. There are some parts of it that are better than the top 2 games on my list, but it is a remake, so there was a level of acceptance going in that I knew I was going to like that game. It did not disappoint. If anything, the changing of the ending they decided to go with and the way that the story may be going in the future is very exciting. But I feel like that bit of known quantity or known commodity kind of brings it down a couple notches in my book. It's not a slight. It's just I don't feel I can give it the best game on PlayStation 4, having known that you know what I'm saying. It's a weird explanation. I know the game is awesome. The combat is amazing. The story, like I said, it plays out very, very well. The music is amazing. It's probably one of the best soundtracks on PlayStation 4, top 2 for sure. But I just misses my top 2 or top 1 just on account of it being something that I knew I was going to like going in, and it did not disappoint. But I got to dock it a couple of points for a couple of reasons, which I'll get into. So now number two is Horizon Zero Dawn. That game goes above Final Fantasy VII because it was a completely new IP. And I always give more weight to a new IP that I love than a game. It's either a sequel or, in this case, a remake. Horizon Zero Dawn is excellent. It is one of the best stories on PlayStation 4. It is one of the best concepts of the entire generation. The main character, Aloy, is amazing. The combat against these giant mechanical monsters is unreal. The explanation of how this world got there, that the game offers you about 2/3 to 75% of the way through the game, is one of the biggest mind blows I've ever experienced in a game. For those that have played it, I'm hinting at what the Zero Dawn is in Horizon Zero Dawn. Easily one of the coolest moments, having that moment of realization of what's actually going on in a game this console generation. Absolutely loved it. Everything about it was great, and it was completely original, completely brand new. I love new IPs that impress me right out of the gate. I wish more new IPs would do it, and that is definitely number 2 on my list. The only game that beats it, and I'm going to sound hypocritical here for a second. Let me explain. The number 1 PlayStation 4 exclusive for me is God of War from 2018. Now, you're probably saying you just gave Final Fantasy VII Remake a raft of shit for being a known commodity. You knew you were going to like it going in because you liked the previous game. What makes God of War any different? And here's what it is. Final Fantasy VII Remake told, for the most part, the same story in a new format with a lot of differences, most of which worked. God of War was a complete reinvention of that franchise. From pillar to post, everything about this new God of War game was completely reinvented from the previous games. The setting, the tone, the designs, the story beats, the Kratos himself is a big part of this. The game was just amazing in how it took this established character and put him in a brand new setting in a brand new era and just crushed it. I love his son Atreus. I love every part of that game, except for the Valkyrie fights. Those Valkyries still haunt me in my sleep. Another game with a mind-blowing ending, but this one blows your mind right up to the end credits with a simple conversation. It's well acted. It's well thought out. The fact that the entire game is a one shot, meaning it's one camera that runs the entire game with no breaks. If it goes from cutscene to gameplay seamlessly, never breaking from the action. It's just it's a incredible feat, and it's the best game on the PlayStation 4. Now, with a caveat, I am leaving out, like I said, a Marvel Spider-Man I have to finish, Bloodborne I didn't play, Ghost of Tsushima I have to finish. If I had to go 4 and 5, it would be a Naughty Dog duo. Last of Us Part 2 at 4, Uncharted 4 at number 5. But there are a lot still, if I were to go deeper into my top 10, that we could talk about. We could talk about some of the VR games that came out for PlayStation VR, like Tetris Effect, which isn't an exclusive anymore, so I guess I have to back off of that one. MLB The Show wouldn't have a place in my top 10 just because it's the best, because it's the only baseball game that there is. I'd probably have Knack in there somewhere, if for no other reason but the memes. Infamous Second Son would be one that I would have to think about. I did like that game. Death Stranding I haven't played, so I'd have to figure that one out too. And Dreams, we can't forget about Dreams, which is the game that lets you make your own game. That I just haven't had a chance to sit down and play either. I would love to know what's going on there. Everything I see from that blows my mind. So those are my top 3 from the PlayStation 4 era. God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Final Fantasy VII Remake, in that order. Subject to change. I feel like Spider-Man could probably wow me at one point. I'm not a Souls guy, so I don't see Bloodborne climbing that chart unless it's the one that finally pulls me in. So yeah, that's where I would go with the PlayStation 4. Feel free to let me know at BigManFanelli on Twitter what your top 3 PlayStation 4 exclusives are, or what I should be playing to maybe edit my list and as soon as I get enough recommendations, maybe I will. I do want to finish Ghost of Tsushima first, but then maybe I'll focus on the PS4 for a little while. Get some of those exclusives that I missed out of the way, so I can finalize this list and move on to the PlayStation 5. Be ready to go. I'm all about that. Good games are good. That is the hard-hitting analysis that you come to this podcast for. Good games are good. Did you know that? I knew that. Oh, boy. All right. Let's finish up this speed run with a topic. It's a little near and dear to my heart. Maybe a little bit of a sore subject just because it didn't actually happen this year. But an article came out today from GamesIndustry.biz, one of the best resources for gaming news, but with a twist that it focuses on the people who make them and the people who design them, which is kind of cool. An article came out from a man named Ryan James, who is the head of analytics for a website called FanCensus. And the title basically said, "We don't need E3 anymore." And he analyzes the media impact from the summer's big announcements. And he compares the social media activity or the media activity between the games that were announced this year at during the Summer Game Fest, with all the different videos that have happened, the Xbox, the PlayStation, and all that, to the games that were revealed last year during the E3 show. And what you're seeing here is that games that were announced in 2020 have had more activity than the games that were announced E3 2019, mostly in the social media realm. So there's one thing that says, when comparing press coverage to further games revealed during last year's E3 with those announced during this year's summer, the results again show that 2020's efforts have proven very fruitful. Taking that large sample of titles, the average number of articles received in this first 72 hours from their announcement at E3 2019 per game is down slightly by 5% than games announced as part of an online event during this summer. It's also a fifth lower than games announced without the use of one at all. This also says what's even more remarkable is that if you widen this range to include coverage up until a whole week post-announcement, E3 2019 falls even further behind 2020, with the average article count now 22% lower than event-tied debuts this year and 60% lower than isolated ones. What he's basically saying is that games announced this year are getting more coverage without an E3 than the games that are announced at E3, using last year as his comparison. And while I understand where he's coming from, then moving on to YouTube activity and Twitter activity for games announced last year versus this year, my argument to that is pretty simple. Last year, E3 happened, so you had all those people at E3 putting out their articles on what was announced, and the interviews, and the hands-on time, and the video reactions and stuff like that. And the people that were reacting on social media, Twitter activity, were reacting as they did every other year. This year, without E3, all you had were people who are in a pandemic, isolated in their homes, social distancing, some of whom have been furloughed or laid off or working from home, where social media activity is a little more easy to get away with, let's say. So people have more time and access to be able to react to the announcements that are being shown. I would love to know this data for this approach in 2020, where the game announcements are spread out over 4 months instead of all coming in that one clean week of E3, if this would hold. Because yes, it's easy to show that Assassin's Creed Valhalla got 1,500 retweets, or 1,500 total tweets, and 101,000 retweets during the first 72 hours of its announcement, versus Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel announced at E3 2019, which had 627 tweets for 99,000 retweets. But those two, it's 900 tweets less, because some of the people, at least I'm assuming, this might be an assumption of mine, that were making those 900 extra tweets weren't able to be on social media when the announcements happened. I hope this makes sense, what I'm trying to say here. But people have, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, more free time to be reacting on social media to these announcements. So I understand where they're coming from, but I don't know that I can completely put full stock into it for that simple caveat. Maybe, and yes, I am biased. I love E3. I love that gaming has its own week where it's non-stop news, non-stop reveals for the entire week, and people can just absorb everything that's coming in the next calendar year in the industry in one fell swoop. I love that. And I have been there 9 times in 10 years, every year since 2010 with the exception of 2013. So there's probably a little bias in me because I love the event so much, and that's fine. I acknowledge that. But it doesn't change the fact that this social media activity, it could just be that more people are able to use social media. If E3 doesn't return in 2021, when the pandemic, hopefully, cross your fingers and toes, is over, and they try this May through August again, I would love to see if those numbers are the same, with people back in their job, assuming people go back to work, and we'll see where the economy is. I don't think they're as easy to compare as this article makes it seem. Read it for yourself. It's GameIndustry.biz, literally called "We Don't Need E3 Anymore." It was an article from July the 29th. Go through their data, see what you think. Hit me up on Twitter at Big Man Fanelli. Let me know what you think about what they said here, and see if you're seeing the same thing I am. That comparing social media activity and comparing the amount of articles that come out, where everyone is just sitting watching online videos at home and has the opportunity to bang out more articles if you're a media guy, or the opportunity to bang out a couple of extra tweets if you're just sitting at your TV watching, is incomparable to an event where the entire industry is in one place. I just don't see how you can easily make that connection that we don't need E3 without taking into account what's happening in the rest of the world. That's just me. So, this was not the normal length speed run. This was more of a slow run. If this was the movie speed, we would have gone under the speed limit and blown up. I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to fit some extra things into the end here because I didn't have any main topics this week. I had 2 great interviews, one with Alfred de Vera of Luminosity Gaming / Vancouver Titans, the second with David Evans of Falling Squirrel and his game, the Vale. I hope you enjoyed them. More interviews in the pipeline in the next few episodes, including one that, if it pans out, is very, very, very exciting. Next week, we will talk about all the fighting game news that's finally happening. Finally, fighting game news starting Friday night at 8 p.m. with the Developers Roundtable. Tekken and Soul Calibur and Street Fighter are already confirmed. Very excited about that, so we'll have lots to talk about with the fighting games when we come back next week. But until then, thank you as always for listening to this Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, brought to you by Fox PHL The Gambler 102.5 FM Philadelphia and iHeartRadio. Thank you as always for your support. And as always, see you next week